Hi there. In this video, we're going to be talking about defining terms. In the last section, we talked about points, lines, and planes. Now what we're going to use is we're going to use those undefined terms to start actually coming up with concrete definitions of certain words. So let's get started. So the first term that I want to talk about is using the concept of a line to describe a couple of terms that we're going to use for the rest of the class, okay? Number one is that we can split lines into two different groups, okay? And we can talk about pairs of lines, and we can talk about parts of lines, all right? So pairs means I have more than one, okay? And when I have more than one line, I've got two different kinds of lines, all right? I've got parallel lines, and I've got perpendicular. All right. Now parallel lines are parallel lines are two lines that run side by side next to each other and don't intersect. Okay. And if I were to show that two lines are parallel, I use an arrow on each of those lines to show that these are two lines that will never intersect. Okay. So let's write that real quick. The next pair of lines that we have are perpendicular lines. So I draw lines that cross each other like this and that are going to form a right angle here. All right. So these are two lines that form 90 degrees, okay, or a right angle, however you want to look at it. All right. So those are the two different types of pairs of lines that we have. Now we can also look at lines and look at their parts, all right? So if we take parts and we divide that into two different things, we're going to have two pieces here. We're going to have what's called a segment, and we're going to have what's called a ray. Now a segment is a line with two endpoints. So let's draw a picture. So here's a segment, all right, and this is a line with two endpoints, okay? And then a ray is a line with one endpoint, all right? So this is a line with one endpoint, all right? And so we have these, and I want to use some symbols and naming tactics for these kinds of lines. So if I were to have parallel lines, all right, so let's call this one, say, line L and line M. If I wanted to show that line L and M are parallel, I would say line L is parallel using two vertical lines like this and comparing those two, okay? If I wanted to show that, say, line N and P are parallel, I would say line N is, perpendicular to line P. And so the symbol I would use for perpendicular is an upside down T. All right, if I were to show that this segment, which we'll call segment AB, exists, then I would call this line segment AB just with a line on top. Okay, notice how I don't have arrows on this, and that tells me that we're dealing with a line segment. Okay, a ray, and let's put 2 points on here, and let's call this CD. If I wanted to name this ray CD, then I would name it ray CD and put an actual ray above it. Notice how I draw a line with one arrow on the side, and notice how the endpoint is the one we start with. All right, and let's go ahead and let's write out another example. I'm just going to draw a generic picture of a ray, and I'm going to draw a line here going through another point here and here. Let's call this ray DC. Okay, now this one is different because D is my endpoint here, so when I name this, I want to write DC with a ray on top. The next thing that I want to talk about is a circle, okay? And a circle is a set of points that are equidistant from a center. And so here's an example of a circle. Now what I want to do is I want to label the center of my circle, okay, which we'll call this point P. All right, so P is my center, and the point from here to any location on the outside of my circle is going to be the same. All right, and some of the properties of my circle is I'd want to label this segment here, the distance from the center to the outside is called my radius. and the distance from one side of my circle to the other that passes through the center is called the diameter. Okay? And the one thing that I know about the relationship between the radius and the diameter is that my radius is equal to the diameter divided by 2. All right, my radius is half the diameter. Now the other thing that I could say is that my diameter, d, is equal to 2 times my radius. So if I multiply my value for my radius by 2, I'll get the length of my diameter. The next thing that I want to talk about are angles. And I define angles as 2 rays with a common endpoint. So let's draw a picture of that. One point here with a ray going on this side and then another ray going here. Now I'm going to create a point here and here. Now I'm going to name this angle JIM, okay? And what I want to do is name this a couple different ways. So naming an angle, I would put an angle symbol and put JIM. Or I could do angle MIJ. Okay, needless to say, I have one right here and I have another right here, and I is my common endpoint. All right, so that's my endpoint. And notice that when I name these, that I is in the middle of how I name that angle. Now, we can also measure angles in degrees, but we'll do that as an activity in class and not in this video. The last thing that I want to talk about is this concept of a midpoint. A midpoint is just what it means. It's the middle point between two other points. So let's say that I have a line segment RS that has a length of 8 inches, okay? And if I wanted to find the midpoint, which I'll call T, all right, T cuts this in half. So RT, this distance is 4 inches, and TS also has a distance of 4 inches, okay? So that's exactly what a midpoint does. It cuts something in half. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you guys soon. Thanks, bye.